God, what the most awkward begin to a stream ever. Hey, now we are live. The reason behind that is because I said don't say anything, and the message is not being received clearly. I could see that we're live on Twitch. Let me make sure that YouTube is working properly. Anybody watching the stream may notice that you're unable to see Matt, because for whatever reason his webcam is not connecting right now. Don't say anything. Oh, okay. The stream is live. We're good. Okay.
The internet is down in Mordor.
Yeah. Wow. I didn't realize you were live from Mordor, Matt. Well, once your webcam connects, I'll put you on the screen, but right now you're invisible. The one ring is on his finger, and also he has cast a spell on his surroundings so that you don't see that either. Let me go ahead and
Take off the ring.
Whoa. Please don't do that. Let me go ahead and announce that we're live all across Discord and social media. Matt, whatever you did, don't do that. Hey, WT, how's it going? Oh, he's working? Okay, let me show him then. Okay. All right. Your lighting is pretty bad. So if you could possibly fix that while I make my announcements. I apologize to those of you out there who are expecting us to start at 7:30 sharp, but we've had some technical issues on Matt's end. And hello, everybody, and Twitch and YouTube. I see WT, I see Moogle, I see Bonnie Bell Plumbottom. That's like a very hobbitish name. I see Offtree and Aiden, and of course I see Alice and Zach. Welcome in. What happened? Well, Matt was a little late coming in, but then his webcam just would not connect. For whatever reason, it was just giving the squares. And I think the big issue is that Matt is using browser Discord. And Matt, do you have time after this to set up the proper Discord? Okay, we'll do that then.
You think that's going to improve the video load?
About 1,000%. Oh,
okay.
Not to do something, that was to Matt, because Matt was doing something on, don't worry, nothing for the chat. The chat, you guys do your thing as normal. No, that was Matt, because his webcam was going up and down, but it actually, whatever you did actually worked, so maybe I was incorrect there. Welcome into the stream, everybody.
I turned my camera off and turned it back on again.
That did work, so I was incorrect in that sense. While I'm still in the process of promoting, let's start with Matt. Go ahead and introduce yourself for people.
Hi, I'm Matt Richardson. I'm usually known online, at least on Quora, as Lore Master, and I run the website for our team, the Nine, at lore-master.com.
Sid, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself as well?
Hi, I'm Sid Kemp. I've been writing about Tolkien since 1974, however long ago that was. And I'm actually going to share some of the first things I discovered in a few minutes. And I'm just really glad to be with everybody out there. I hope to hear a lot from you folks on YouTube now that you're live with us, as well as Twitch. The more you talk, the better the show gets.
Absolutely. Okay, so we're all set up finally. Everything's working. Our moderators are in place. I see that Alice on the YouTube side. I see Moogle on the Twitch side. So welcome in, everybody. We're going to be doing the Council of Tolkien. In just a few minutes, we're going to start the actual thing. Me and Matt, we didn't talk about the order, but I talked about this earlier with Sid. And Sid's going to go first. And then you are going to go, and I'm going to go last. Is that amenable, Matt? I think you said yes, but I didn't hear anything.
Oh yeah, it's
Okay.
fine with me.
Wonderful. And Wayne is one of my friends and one of my moderators on the Twitch side, and made a fantastic reference that I think you guys will appreciate. He said, "Welcome to Tevildo's House of Cats." You see the reaction there, Wayne. Very quickly before we start, I wanted to just kind of just chill us all out and tell a little quick anecdote. I had already talked with Matt about this, and I meant to bring it up with Sid, but we didn't have the time earlier. But I got a very strange message on Quora a few weeks ago. Remember, I called you about this, Matt, from a guy. I won't even say his name because we don't need to say his name. It's not important. But just this long diatribe about how he's no longer going to be in the Tolkien community on Quora because everybody is just so terrible, and he told these stories in his own like bizarre, exaggerated way that apparently all three of us, independently from each other, blocked this guy. And also one of our contemporaries on there, he's not a member of our group, but Hilario blocked him as well. And Prince Imrahil is goated. It came from the chat there. And we'll address some of the questions coming in just a moment. And I had this fun discussion with Matt about, this guy who was very argumentative, and that's what it came down to. Everything was an argument with him about how quickly you block somebody who's being rude. And I said that, between the three of us, I think Sid hits the button the fastest. He's just like, I ain't got time for this. Block. And then I think I have a little bit.
Actually, I don't think so.
I don't know. You've said a few times.
It's not rudeness. If somebody is utterly closed-minded, like I got one from this morning, someone asked a question about Buddha, and this guy said, Buddha's all wrong. Only Christ has the answer. And I looked at his feed, and the only thing he does is go out to other religions and proclaim the gospel of Jesus Christ according to him, as if he's the voice of God. That's what I block.
That's Sauron and Numenor.
Right there.
Yeah.
I'm getting the echo.
I'm getting the echo.
But that is rude, is my point. That is a rude thing to do, and I think that Sid doesn't have any patience for that, and then I think that I have a little bit of patience. I'll try to engage with people, but then I was just like, oh, this guy's not arguing in good faith. And then apparently, when I found out that Matt blocked somebody, Matt doesn't block people, you guys. He's like the most
the guy from Mordor
patient
doesn't
dude.
block anybody.
He's the most patient guy.
Represents Mordor on our team, doesn't block anybody. That's interesting.
And Hilario doesn't usually block people either. He's usually the one that gets blocked. So, Aiden in the chat wants to know what our favorite characters are, just for fun, just favorite Tolkien character. Mine is Gandalf. Go ahead, guys, shout it out.
If you go for character rather than meaning in the book, definitely. Well, I can't choose between Goldberry and Tom. I have to take them as a.
They are a package deal. They are a package. Although you do gravitate, I think, more towards Goldberry because there's less about her, and I think you find her more interesting. Matt, favorite character, just for fun.
Well, I'm going to cheat a little bit and say Tom and Ungoliant, just because they represent the two extremes, at least in Arda, that is. But that's why I picked those two.
Interesting. So we have very different. You guys both kind of went for Tom there. Time for Tolkien, indeed. All right, so let me set up the timer real quick. I'm a little befuddled here, but we're bouncing back from it. Let me get the Google timer.
John, I'll be right back.
Oh, okay, maybe not. Okay, well, I can get the timer up in the meantime. Is it Matt's go? I'm sorry, Sid's going to go first, but we need Matt to be here so that he could hear what Sid has to say. And hello there, Reekle Thingol. Greetings from Puerto Rico. Wonderful to hear from you. I have Puerto Rican heritage myself. So hello to everybody in the chat, of course. You're back, Matt? You're good?
Yeah.
Okay, so our first segment. Well, first, actually, let's go over to the screen. I'm on the. Here we are. Okay, so we are residing here in Minas Tirith this time around. The ring has been destroyed, and we partied hard in the field of Cormallen last time. And hello there, Laurel's in the chat. Hey, Laurel, how's it going? And now we're here for the crowning of the King Aragorn II Elisar. But Sid is going to take our first segment, and we're going to give him 2 minutes to intro the segment. So go ahead, Sid.
Hello, everybody. I'm really glad to be here. A central element of Tolkien's alternate history, that is our history from a different world, a magical world, is good magic, the magic of the Valar, the Unfallen Maiar, and the Unfallen Elves. The idea of the alternate history is, if this is our past, who are we? And how can we live our best lives? Today, we clearly do not have any natural magic like Galadriel's Dell with her mirror, or the ability to make a phial of Arendelle. Yet we have magic and elven magic in our blood through Melian, Luthien, Elros, Arwen, and others. And we have Maya and elven wisdom in our hearts and minds through Gandalf, Tom Bombadil, Elrond, and others. What then is the legacy we carry today of elven magic? What gifts do we carry, and how do we use them well? Note, I'm talking specifically about magic. Magic is related to love and wisdom, which we also received from good immortal beings. But today, let's focus on the magic. What do we do today at our best that is the human quality that was in the elves' magic? And specifically, how do you use this in your own lives? At the end of the half hour, I'll share Tolkien's thoughts on this from his letters and his essay on fairy stories. But I'd like to hear from you guys and your inspirations first. I'm listening to all of you now. Hope to hear a lot of you from the live stream.
Okay. You filled up the 2 minutes.
You filled up the 2 minutes.
Wonderfully there. And Laurel was quite tickled by what I said earlier about we partied hard at the field of Cormallen last time. I'll give my thoughts real quick here. It's interesting that you say that there is no magic left, but I think that there is. And I think that like our understanding of magic is very through the lens of looking at even, you know, like besides taking out the wizards and the Maiar and the Valar and all these characters, looking at like what the elves and what they do. You mentioned the Phial of Arendelle, you mentioned a few other devices, but you know, Gandalf once stated that all of the different races have their own magic. Even hobbits have what he called ordinary magic, their ability to be quieter and stealthier and to move unseen. And people often ask on Quora, when did the hobbits disappear? And I would tell them that, well, according to Tolkien, they never disappeared. They're around. We just don't notice them because they're so good at not being noticed. And the big people had their own magic. Where I find it a little troublesome is that oftentimes the human magic, the mortal man magic, as seen in Tolkien's Legendarium, is almost always evil. Like we see the necromancers and the sorcerers and the men that are trying to extend their lives. And but I think that, and from the chat, Zach brought up the point that I was going to make, is that we do have the ability of magic in our creations, in art, in music, in theater, our stories. I would tell anybody that thinks that's not magic that you stop smothering your inner child. Matt, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Well, this is a hard question because, obviously there isn't any what you would call real magic outside of, what you might call, love and
That's a big
other
one.
types of emotions, which can seem, if it's the biggest one, but I mean, things like that seem magical, emotional, what you might call emotional magic is what we have. If it rises up in our conscious, in our hearts to move us to great things, great acts of um, deeds, valiant deeds, humanitarian deeds, those kinds of things. That can be magical all by itself. I mean, so that is a magic. I'm not saying it isn't, but as far as being able to make a lightning bolt or do other kinds of things that even the good characters in Tolkien's works were able to do. The channeling of good magic, or what you might call white magic, is something that Tolkien wrote about and believed in, because there was a paradigm, there was a spectrum in place. So I don't believe that the whole idea that every kind of magic is bad, not in Tolkien's works, because both sides of the coin are powerful, good and evil. Um, but so I don't. It doesn't translate exactly the same way. But that's part of the appeal of Tolkien's works. So, uh, but just in conclusion, I would just say that I think that there's a real effort to show that the beings and creatures even that are good can channel the same uh, magical power, but use it for good. And I think that lesson of duality, the fact that the good forces on Earth and in us are powerful and can prevail, is, I think, the whole point of the topic of magic, white or black.
I agree with everything that you said, and I'm going to kick it over to Sid in a moment. I just wanted to react to say that I would define magic in the practical magic, I would say, not like what you'd said, like the thunderbolts and the lightning, very, very frightening me, mamma mia. But inspiration, anything that inspires. Music is the biggest magic of all. The creation of the world in Tolkien's Legendarium was through magic. The Ainu Lindala, Ainu referring to the angels, Lindala is music of, the music of the angels. Um, I could hear a song and instantly be transported back to, in my mind, where I was when I first heard it, the sights, the sounds, the smells, the emotions. That's a form of magic to me. Sid, I'm kicking it back to you.
I like what both of you said, Matt, and also John, especially the second part of what you said. I want to focus it perhaps on one word, but a word with two meanings. The word is creativity. And by the way, if we think about human beings who had no elvish influence, remember Gone Bury Gone. I would guess that Tolkien would think most of humanity would be living the way Gone Bury Gone lives all the way to today, without the uplifting influence of whatever we call magic or creativity used in healthy and good ways. And by creativity in relation to Tolkien and what he says in On Fairy Stories, I would say there are two elements. One of them is the creation of stories, music, any art form, music, any beautiful art, any uplifting story, also stories that just bring fun and escape. The Bombadil poems, the absurdity elements there, Tolkien basically felt this world as we're living in it now, in this automated mechanical age that we've created for ourselves, escaping from it makes a lot of sense. Not run away and hide, but take a break. And his stories, but also regular fiction that isn't of other worlds, subcreate under the divine good themes and good ideas. And that's one half of it. But I think there's another one. At the end of On Fairy Stories, Tolkien points out that we create the civilization we live in by our actions. And we've done a pretty sucky job so far. And what if we start to create our own lives of, as Matt mentioned, love, as lives of helping everyone do better? There's something that Tolkien does in his writing, and the two masters of it in my entire experience of literature are Shakespeare and Tolkien. Every single event that happens anywhere in the story at the beginning, there's a thread that carries it to a good conclusion at the end. Well, in Shakespeare's tragedies, maybe a bad conclusion, as in a sad conclusion, but nothing is left unfinished, or something's left uncertain, but nothing is left forgotten. Like that character disappeared, whatever happened to him. In Shakespeare and in Tolkien, it just doesn't happen. And Tolkien adds, if you look at the whole point of the end of an age, eucatastrophe, crisis events, all bringing in glory and goodness. Every character's karma, if I use a Buddhist term for it, his just deserts, his salvation if he's worthy of salvation, or other if he's a Saruman or a Wormtongue, gets resolved. And this is why I think it's so important that Faramir survives and Gandalf steps out into it using a deep level of angelic power to make sure that happens. It's for the future of the Fourth Age that someone as elven-wise as Faramir among humans must be part of the Fourth Age for it to get off to a good start. And so this renewing of our own lives, one second, gotcha, this renewing of our own lives and the lives of our family and friends into, I'll use Tolkien's term, a happy ending. It is a leadership. So creativity and leadership are our expressions of white magic or elven magic.
So I agree with everything you're saying, and I want to add to it. And before I add to it, just some stuff coming in from the chat. Alice pointed out that Anton Chekhov and the idea of, I don't know if you're familiar with the idea of Chekhov's gun, something that appears early in the story that seems to vanish but then pays off later. You mentioned that Tolkien used this trope all the time. Shakespeare loved that trope. And we see it in other writers as well. I just want to point out a few things that chat said that are amusing. That was on the YouTube side. On the Twitch side, WT made a joke, and he's kidding, but it brings up a good point when we talked about the file of Galadriel. WT says it's no file of Galadriel, but the LED on his phone is pretty bright. Is that the magic we're talking about? And so said, of course, that he's kidding. But, you know, Tolkien didn't see that much differentiation between fantasy and sci-fi. Sci-fi to him was fantasy in a different setting. It's all about what we could be and what we could attain and everything. And, you know, there was a science fiction writer that once said that magic is just technology that we don't understand. And while I don't necessarily agree with that, I mean, just imagine showing somebody like, say, Faramir, for example, your smartphone. He would think that this has to be magic. There's no way that it's not. So that's just interesting. Also, Laurel said that human magic is seen every time we write a book or a song or a poem. Our magic is much the creation of something beautiful, as it was with the elves. One need only contemplate Van Gogh or stained glass to know that we still have a little magic left. And WT also adds that having the totality of human knowledge in your front pocket is pretty magical. Although, and I know what Sid's thinking, you also have the totality of human stupidity in your front pocket. That's the other side of the blade. I want to react to what you said, though, Sid. Faramir, you mentioned as being elf-like, And I'm going to talk about this a little in my section about mannerisms and such, but I don't think he's elf-like. I think Aragorn is elf-like, and that Faramir seems to be like Aragorn, but he is his own distinct person. I think that Faramir is more of what the average man could attain to be, whereas Aragorn has this lofty sort of history behind him. As you mentioned, he's descended from elves. He's descended from angels. He's got about a billion and seven prophecies about him. Faramir doesn't have any of that. He's the second lesser favored son of a noble, just trying to do the best he can and succeeding at it. I think his magic is also in inspiration. You said creativity. I think inspiration, because creativity has a double-edged sword too. You could create something terrible. You could create something horrific. But to create something that inspires is magic. Although I guess that could be double-edged. You could inspire somebody to do something terrible. But something inspirational, when we say inspirational, we're usually using it in a positive aspect. And I think that, Faramir, look at how he inspired Merry and Pippin, for example. Matt, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Well, I was thinking about Chekhov's gun and something interesting Tolkien does. Like, he does a lot of things interesting. And that is that in the very beginning, what we all remember a lot of us remember the story in the Silmarillion about Melkor going into the void and being in search of the flame imperishable. In this particular case, what we have is Chekhov's unfindable gun. And then later on in the story, towards the end of the end of the Lord of the Rings, the flame imperishable is found. It's found in the characters. It's found in the valiant story where the victors come out ahead and love defeats hate. Love and hate are the opposite ends of the spectrum, and we're talking about magic. And what always kind of irritates me a little bit about movies and plays and all the kinds of stuff we see in the medium out there is that the evil forces have the power of magic, and everyone else is completely left without any resources or power to counter that. In Tolkien, that is not the case. In Tolkien, in the end, as I said a second ago, that we have this Chekhov's invisible gun, which is the flame imperishable, and it cannot be found. It cannot be found. Sauron can't find it. Morgoth can't find it, because they're not capable of finding it. They're not capable of harnessing it. They only think about it in terms of what they can control, what they can abuse, what they can mar, what they can malform. And so they never have the ability to see it, feel it, experience it, understand it. And that leads them to a complete blindness, which is left to us in the end to see how it is found, how it is victorious, how it is the last thing that is always left, because Eru is always left. So I just thought I'd bring that full circle to something that seems to be, kind of sticking its head out of the molehill here for this conversation.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just a few things from chat before I kick it over to you, Sid. Arthur C. Clarke was the author that I was thinking of earlier. That I thank you for that. Zach said something interesting. Zach on the YouTube side said technology is what happens when we try to do good magic, but fail at it. I'm not sure that I agree, but I think J.R.R. Tolkien would agree. There's a question that came in, I don't quite understand it, from Bewades25, who said, when we know that Christopher Tolkien's Silmarillion, which is not Christopher Tolkien's Silmarillion, but we'll get to that in a second, is filled with errors, why quote from the Silmarillion without checking? Why say Mablung was slain in Menegroth when it is made up by K, I don't know who K is, and Christopher Tolkien? To answer the question, the Silmarillion does have errors in it, but unless we are told what the error is, there's no reason to believe it is an error. We don't have an alternate source for this. So, for example, one error that's in the Silmarillion is the incorrect parentage for Gil-galad, but we have a book that tells us otherwise, and Christopher's saying, yes, that was a mistake. There are a few things where Christopher sort of fills in the gaps for his father. That doesn't mean anything bad, because Tolkien's whole idea was about subcreation, as Sid calls it, and that other minds and hands would finish what he started. Unfortunately, Christopher thought that meant only him, but the idea
I have a thought.
canon is very nebulous. Okay, we'll get to you, Matt, but first I got to kick it over to Sid.
Okay, I've got about 9 things in my head replying to everything I've heard, all of which I loved. Kay is Guy Gabriel Kay,
Oh, okay.
who went on to become a wonderful fantasy author of his own, but spent, I believe, about 2 years full-time working with Christopher in order to finish the Silmarillion, which was really nearly complete and guided by instructions that Tolkien left, to the point we should consider the Silmarillion as published, as written by Tolkien. Second, your point about Tolkien's term, subcreation, which these days a lot of people call co-creation or co-creativity, is essential on fairy stories about what he hopes everyone will do. Even Fëanor, for all of his faults, said that in living a life worthy of being turned into a story, future generations will learn of, in his case, valor and devotion and doing what we believe to be right with courage. So these are the themes that come into the music and the stories passed on to us, with our job to artistically co-create or sub-create, to extend them. And actually this live stream does that, but also in our own lives and share in the world, co-create our actual own lives and the life of the world. And as for LEDs, this is a perfect example. Right now there is a contest driving medical companies to create current equipment. The first versions are available that function like a medical tricorder.
Like from Star Trek.
So you can carry on something the size of a cassette recorder that will diagnose illnesses swiftly. And this is really happening. And if you step back and think, how many of the things we have today, like the flip phone, began as gimmicks on Star Trek, future technology on Star Trek, and we have them half a century later. And one of those, and I think one of the most valuable, that is much used more for the good than for ill, is the LED light. How often has somebody's life, I won't say life been saved, although that would happen too, but just life is suddenly a lot better off because you've got a flashlight as bright as a phone LED in your pocket when you lock your keys in the car on a dark night in an empty parking lot with all the stores closed. So there's a lot of good stuff that happens.
Sid, let me just cut in here. Because I do want to address the chat here. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Well, I'm waiting for you to mute. Okay, there we go. So Bewades is saying, we know Mablung survived the Runa Doriath. This seems to be something you're very hung up on. Nobody really was talking about Mablung, so I'm not sure why this is coming up. But we don't know that. What we have are a bunch of stories, some of them contradictory to each other, and you have to decide which ones you believe. I've never heard anything about Mablung surviving. Of course, elves always survive anyway. They just go to the Undying Lands. But I just want to point out that Tolkien also wrote that Angband was on the moon. That is not something from the Silmarillion, and it actually invalidates most of the book and a lot of the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit as well. So, how many Balrogs were there? Were there thousands or were there 7? There's alternate versions of these stories. What they did with the Silmarillion was they took thousands and thousands of pages of various different versions of many different stories that were written from 1917 up until right before he died, and tried their best to make it into a cohesive story. In universe, you can describe any sort of errors or inconsistencies as errors of translation, mistakes that Bilbo made. But I'm just curious why we're talking about Mablung when the topic right now is magic. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Sid. You were saying.
You were saying.
And thank you for that reply. And yeah, how does any part of the story change what you're going to do tomorrow morning? I'd like to take, for everyone, the three of us and everyone in comments, to look at your own life, your own either, fantasy or science fiction or ordinary. Maybe you play a musical instrument, creativity. I'm, by the way, finding that singing is healing my body. So there's a magic of medicine in the arts. And I also aspire to live with the people in my life. Some people say, what would Jesus do? What would Buddha do? What would Gandalf do? Well, I like asking, what would Gandalf do? And I'll do it today. Would anyone out there want to say, hey, here's what I'm creating, either in the world, meaning leadership and inspiration, great choice of word there, Matt, or here's what I'm creating artistically to remind us of how we can live better. I'd like to just float that question out there at this point.
I just to reply to something you said about singing healing your body. I mean, there's a reason we play music for babies in the womb. There's a reason we play music for people in comas and such. Rico Thingle in the chat just said, what would Tolkien do? Which is a whole nother thing, which is probably, I don't know, dress up like a polar bear and scream at his neighbors with an axe. But Matt, I want to kick it over to you first before I reply to any of that.
Okay, thank you. My comment earlier was related to something that someone said earlier about, failed technology being a failed example of magic, or a magic that isn't, being used properly. And I kind of understand what he's saying. I don't disagree with what he's saying, really, but I do have a different take on it. So, for example, tonight we are engaged in what I would call the modern application of a Palantir. We are communicating through the internet with everybody who's watching, everyone who's going to be watching the recording of this show. The 9 on Quora has been read by over 170 million readers. We have over 20,000 followers, all 9 of us together in our group, not counting the people who will be watching this show now and in the future. So we're engaged in magic in a way. Yes, it is technological, but the fact that we're talking about these topics, about Tolkien, about his works, his principles, good and evil, and all of this together, we are speaking mind to mind, human to human, yes, but to mind, heart to heart, in a way that was the way that all the Palantirs were connected and set up to be. And so we're doing that in a way. It's so funny that so many things that we do are metaphorically true, if not exactly physically true. But if anybody was to ever speak metaphorically true about anything, it was certainly Tolkien. So I wanted to just to add that. I don't have any comments about anything other than agreement with what Sid has just said. So that's all I've got for now.
I just want to address something, because I just went to type into the chat, and apparently I'm logged in on the wrong account. So if you see NecroVMX in the YouTube chat, that's me. I was replying about the whole Mablung thing, because the alternate source that was given was just an older draft. Just because something contradicts an older draft doesn't mean that it's incorrect. Tolkien also wrote that Tur, for example, killed 5 Balrogs. We know that there weren't, that's not possible. Or it was in that version of the story. There's a lot of different versions of these stories. To say that something that contradicts something that Tolkien wrote was made up, Tolkien made it all up. It's all made up. So
Yeah.
that's my answer to that.
I'd like to chime. I'd like to chime in here.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
If we went with the first thing that Tolkien wrote, Strider was a hobbit.
And
Hang on, guys. Tolkien
and his
Trotter.
is Trotter.
Trotter. That's right. And Tolkien was constantly revising and changing through different threads of his own mind. He was getting linguistic bits and images of characters and how they would grow. What we see over time is that through most of his life, this may have changed only in the last few years, everyone got elevated. So this hobbit named Trotter became a man named Strider, became the future king of the reunited Arnor and Gondor. And as John is going to talk about a little later, an amazingly elevated character. Arwen got elevated. Galadriel got elevated in later versions of her backstory. And so let's elevate ourselves. And to give one example of that that's very real related to technology, when I was, around 15 to 25 years old, if on the news you heard someone was in critical condition, and what happened? 50% of the time they died. The miracle of medicine called, I'm not getting the word exactly, but there's a thing called the crucial hour. That's not quite the right term. If we can keep the blood and oxygen flowing for an hour and get them out of that crisis within an hour, and now 90% of critical patients go off the critical list and recover nearly fully.
It's called the
And
golden
that is
window.
because we have.
window.
Say again.
It's called the golden window or the golden hour.
The golden window or the golden hour. Yes, thank you. And by the way, that was presented first to the public on Quincy M.E. And his work actually changed the rate at which emergency medicine improved. And it was learned in the heart of the Korean War in MASH units.
Okay.
So this culture of making life better through technology, but more through our heart and our humanity and our caring, is the best that we are. Let's keep doing it.
Okay. Just to go back to chat for a second, I've been trying to steer us away from this Mablung conversation the whole time, and you're kind of not getting it. We're talking about something specific right now. You were saying, why quote the Silmarillion when it's full of errors? And I tried to answer you, but nobody was quoting that part of the Silmarillion or talking about Mablung or the fall of Doriath or anything. You're making a lot of very authoritarian sort of points in the chat that don't hold up. You're quoting the War of the Jewels, which is made up of older, alternate, and sometimes even scrapped versions of the story. The Lay of the Children of Húrin, there's a lot of different versions of it. A lot of different versions of it. You're saying we only have one Mablung story and that's the only thing that Tolkien ever wrote about him? You're incorrect. You're just wrong. And we're out of time here. We're going to put it to bed here because too much of the time was eaten up by this ridiculous thing that nobody was doing what you're saying. Nobody was quoting something from the Silmarillion that is contradictory to something else. I've said it many times, the entire concept of canon is extremely nebulous, and it's not worth arguing about. You're going to say he never died. I'm going to agree with you. He never died. He was slain in the vault, and then his spirit went to Mandos, and he got a new body. He did not pass from the world. And that is the absolute last thing we're going to say about Mablung here today.
Okay, that sounds good.
Because so much of the time. Hold on.
Let me bring in what Tolkien would say about all of this.
Yeah. All right, I'm trying to.
Everything he wrote and published is history, and there will be multiple versions. And he did write many versions, many of which he threw away. respect the story, respect what he said. Feel free occasionally to disagree with it as you create.
That's yes.
But create
Yes.
in a harmonious and beautiful way.
I'm
That's
really
what he said.
wanting to move past this. I don't want to go in because we're getting, because so much time of Sid's half hour was eaten up by this. I'm going to add an extra 5 minutes here so we could actually finish talking about what we were supposed to talk about. Okay, so with 5 minutes on the timer, final thoughts about practical magic in the modern age, whether it's the 7th age or the 6th age or whatever it was. I think that, like, somebody in the chat said, I have to scroll up a bit. Where is it? Oh, maybe it was Twitch. All right. Music is absolutely magic, because think about if you had a really bad breakup and that one song that made everything better. That was something that was said in the chat. And by the way, going back to the idea of co-creation and sub-creation and Tolkien's thoughts on application, and this is really important, two different people can take two different things from a song and can help them in two very different ways. And that in itself is, I think, a form of magic. Sid, final thoughts?
Final thoughts?
My wife just whispered, cooking.
Oh, that's a good one.
Oh, that's a good one.
Think of the Shire celebrating in 1420. Think of the meal at Beorn's house. And this we do every day. And there's an idea from yoga that if we bless the food we eat and then eat it, we're taking in God's blessing. There's obviously a Christian version of that too, and a Jewish version. So let us celebrate and elevate life every time we take a bit of food.
Or cook it. You said cooking, not just the act of eating food.
Not just the act of eating food, but
Absolutely.
Creating
Absolutely.
it.
The joy of
creating it.
The joy of cooking is one of the things also that heals me. There's no question. And sharing what we...
That's a really good one. Matt, final thoughts?
I'm still, it seems silly to still think about, what real magic there is in the world, like real magic outside of, emotional, basically magic.
Oh, that's what you've been saying for the past half hour, that it's emotional.
I know, but I'm trying to come up with I agree with all that. But I'm also, I think, when I think about the natural sciences, that many people can say, demonstrate there was a design intelligence to the universe. Let's just say that. In speaking related to Tolkien, we're talking about Eru Iluvatar, obviously. But some of the natural sciences are just amazing. The things that can happen, the things that give power or energy to things, the Northern Lights, just things like that are just absolutely crazy kinds of natural magic in a way, because there's such a wonderful universe that's out there that does so many amazing things that we get to, in our lifetimes, get to experience, and that's just a real blessing. And I guess that's where I'll end.
Okay. Just a few things from the chat. People are talking about which bands. I'd really like to know which songs, guys, help them through rough times. Somebody mentioned Green Day. Somebody mentioned Judas Priest. I definitely would want to hear the specific songs. And then Bonnie Bell says, Bonnie Bell Plumbottom, such an amazing hobbitish name. So true. The secret ingredient in good home cooking is love. You see, you could tell a machine how to make a pie. It's not going to be as good as your grandma or whatever, Okay. All right. I did set 5 minutes, but I guess we didn't need a full 5 minutes, or rather we only have a few seconds left, so I'm just going to stop it there. Matt, you're going to be the second one up to introduce your topic, and I know that somebody, I don't know if they're present here, but somebody had specifically requested that Matt talk about Beren and Luthien more, and I told him that the other day on the phone. And let's have you. I know it's related to Beren and Luthien at least. Go ahead, 2 minutes to intro your topic.
Thank you. It is related to Beren and Luthien, and when John mentioned that to me, I thought that's a very interesting request because I was actually thinking about doing another one. And so the one I'm going to be doing today is the reading from the Silmarillion when Beren is captured by Sauron in Galroth, the Isle of Werewolves. And we're going to be talking just about I'm going to do the reading, but we're going to be talking about the magical power. We're talking about magic in this chapter today. This is great. We're going to be talking about the magical power displayed here, especially by Luthien, who we know is the daughter of Melian the Maya, and her father King Fingal of Doriath. And Beren has been captured, and he's in the dungeon, and she is approaching the castle and is accompanied by Huan, the wolfhound and hound of the Valar. And so we're going to start with the first paragraph here. It's about 3 or 4 paragraphs, but it's going to go quick. Here goes. In that hour, Luthien came, and standing upon the bridge that led to Sauron's Isle, she sang a song that no walls of stone could hinder. Beren heard, and he thought that he had dreamed, for the stars shone above him, and in the trees nightingales were singing. In answer, he sang a song of challenge that he had made in praise of the 7 stars, the sickle of the Valar, that Varda hung above the north, as a sign of the fall of Morgoth. Then all strength left him, and he fell down into darkness. But Luthien heard his answering voice, and she sang then a song of greater power.
Oh shoot!
The wolves
Okay,
howled.
Matt, you're only supposed to take up 2 minutes. You were supposed to intro. Yeah, you were supposed to intro, not. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Let me
There's
set.
my long.
All right.
Great.
I'm going to set you at a half hour. Continue. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. Okay. The wolves howled, and the isle trembled. Sauron stood in the high tower, wrapped in his black thought, but he smiled hearing her voice, for he knew that it was the daughter of Melian. The fame of the beauty of Luthien and the wonder of her song had long gone forth from Doriath, and he thought to make her captive and hand her over to the power of Morgoth, for his reward would be great. Therefore he sent a wolf to the bridge, but Huan slew him silently. Sauron sent others one by one, and one by one Huan took them by the throat and slew them. Then Sauron sent Draugulin, the dread beast, old in evil, lord and sire of the werewolves of Angband. His might was great. The battle of Huan and Draugulin was long and fierce. Yet at length Draugulin escaped, and fleeing back to the tower, he died before Sauron's feet. And as he died, he told his master, "Huan is there." Now Sauron knew well, as did all in that land, the fate that was decreed for the Hound of Valinor, and it came into his thought that he himself would accomplish it. Therefore he took upon himself the form of a werewolf, and made himself that had yet walked the world, and he came forth to win the passage of the bridge. So great was the horror of his approach that Huan leapt aside. Then Sauron sprang upon Luthien, and she swooned before the menace of the fell spirit in his eyes and the foul vapor of his breath. But even as he came, falling as she cast a fold of her dark cloak before his eyes, he stumbled, for a fleeting drowsiness came upon him. Then Huan sprang. There befell the battle of Huan and Wolf Sauron, and the howls and baying echoed in the hills, and the watchers on the walls of Ered Wethrin across the valley heard it afar and were dismayed. But no wizardly spell, neither fang nor venom, nor devil's art, nor beast's strength, could overthrow Huon of Valinor, and he took his foe by the throat and pinned him down. Then Sauron shifted shape, from wolf to serpent, and from monster to his own accustomed form. But he could not elude the grip of Huon, without forsaking his body utterly. Ere his foul spirit left his dark house, Luthien came to him, and said that he should be stripped of his raiment of flesh, and his ghost be sent quaking back to Morgoth. And she said, "Ere everlasting thy naked self shall endure the torment of his scorn, pierced by his eyes, unless thou yield to me the mastery of thy tower." Then Sauron yielded himself, and Luthien took mastery of the isle and all that was there. And Huon released him, and immediately he took form of a vampire, great as a dark cloud across the moon, and he fled, dripping blood from his throat upon the trees, and came to Tar-Nufuin, and dwelt there, filling it with horror.
Great reading.
So there's the reading for today.
Great reading. I loved your little Karkaroth voice there. That was fantastic. Little bit of acting, a little bit of theatricality. There goes a long way. 2 points I want to bring up about the role of the power here seen. And I know you wanted to talk about Sauron, and you wanted to talk about Huon and Luthien. Luthien, of course, has the greatest show of power in this, and it's right away, just from the very beginning, it says that walls of stone could not hinder her song. And this
paragraph.
Yeah, this is just like, just think about that. Like, we have this a few times in the Legendarium where sounds travel a great distance in a way that could really only be described as magic, or at least great power, whether it's the Horn of Gondor, the Valaroma, or even the horn that was given to Merry at the end of the Lord of the Rings, or the scream of Morgoth in Lameth reaching the Balrogs, not only very, very far away in Angband, but deep within the earth as well, and that this was a shockwave that rent mountains and echoed until the end of the first age. When Tuor came there, he played his harp, and that drowned it out for like a little while, but Morgoth's scream was still heard after that. Tulkas fighting basically from space was a big one. There's a lot of these instances where great power is through voice, because Gandalf's word of command, the Ainu Lindala, to beat that over the head again, the music of the angels that created the world. The other thing I wanted to point out, Varda was brought up, and how she hung the sickle of the Valar to signify the defeat of Morgoth. If you ever want to see it, just look outside your window on a clear night. The Valakirkra, the sickle of the Valar, has a lot of other names in Tolkien's Legendarium. It's called the Wain, it's called the Bear, it's a constellation. It's also called the Big Dipper. So if you ever want to see that, just take a look outside. And I know we talked about this a little bit on the phone, the different forms that Sauron takes, just to imagine him becoming a werewolf, becoming a vampire, becoming a serpent, just trying anything to get out of Huon's grip. And I always think, like, why doesn't he turn into something really small, like a mouse or something, and slip away? But obviously he didn't think of that. But maybe he was panicking a bit, or maybe he just can't go that small, or maybe he was afraid that Huon would eat him. Huon, of course, was protected by prophecy. And this is an instance of somebody, and I think Shakespeare would appreciate this, somebody trying to bend prophecy to their will. Sauron finds out only the greatest of all the werewolves could destroy Huon, so he's like, well, that's probably me, right? I'll just become a werewolf, and it doesn't work out for him so well. Sid, I'm going to kick it over to you now.
What I love about this passage is the many echoes in so many other pieces of Tolkien. Um, I do think that Luthien's voice is, in a sense, the closest thing later ages have to the Song of the Ainu. Her music is a magical music that creates, and it's phenomenal. The descriptions in certain parts of what you wrote reminded me so much of Gandalf fighting the Balrog and the utter darkness and the faith and the renewal there. The bit about Sauron being grabbed by Huon and changing forms, that's actually a very classical folk motif from a traditional elven folklore in which a great knight captures a wicked elf figure and a wicked elf figure captures a hero and holds him, and he keeps changing form until he finds a way to escape. Or sometimes the evil one is the one who's caught and is struggling to escape until he gives up. So there are so many themes here, and some of them are echoed all the way down into the Lord of the Rings, about escaping darkness in many different ways. And I just think there are so many themes that recur from this one moment, this one story about this deep and powerful battle of dark and light, all the way through, obviously Gandalf and the Balrog, but also the ways in which destiny, must be fulfilled in the story of what will the fate of the Lord of the Nazgul be, not by the hand of man. All of these playing out and echoing again and again through all of Tolkien's work, I think is just an absolutely beautiful, creative path to explore. And by the way, one quick item.
Okay.
The bear is Latin. Ursa Major is what we call the Big Dipper.
Yep.
So he carried it all the way through to our own Latin history. It's the same constellation.
And it's interesting that he did
that.
Okay. It's interesting that he did that, considering he didn't really like Latin all that much. But here is some things from the chat that I want to reply to, and then I'm going to kick it back over to Matt. Let's see. There's a lot of music discussion in here, born from the previous discussion. But I wanted to point out that Alice said it was very Macbeth, the idea of bending prophecy, and actually a lot of Tolkien's entire approach to the way that he approached prophecy and the fulfillment of such is Shakespearean in a very deliberate manner, because he was actually, as a young man, experiencing Macbeth for the first time, very disappointed in the way that turned out. He was very sure that no man born of woman would turn out to be a woman. And in fact, it turned out to be somebody who was not born in the traditional sense, but came out through a cesarean section, and he thought that was a bit of a cop-out. And this is what leads us to Éowyn killing the Witch King. And of course, there's a lot of different interpretations of that prophecy and everything. But all of the prophecies that appear in Tolkien's work, from the Lord of the Rings, from the Silmarillion and everything, are definitely born of the author's desire to sort of fix an issue that he saw with Shakespeare. Let's see, there was something else that I wanted to bring up here. Oh, so the topic of music led to, I mentioned, we were all talking about songs that helped us through something rough. I mentioned a song called Do You Realize, which is by a band called the Flaming Lips, and there's some other people, Zach, for example, that really appreciate the Flaming Lips. And I thought, I was listening to a composition that they wrote called Seven Skies H3, which was a song that lasts for a full day. It's 24 hours long. And of course, I didn't listen to it all contiguous. I would stop and come back to it. But there's a section in there, and it's going to go to a little bit of what Sid was talking about. That was a lot of drums and chimes and sort of synthetic choral vocals. And the only thing that I can think of throughout this entire section, which was several hours long, was Gandalf facing the Balrog. And of course, Sid was just talking about that, and I'm so glad that this all comes together and that you mentioned the Balrog, because very recently on Quora, and I mentioned the Valaroma and the Horn of Gondor earlier, somebody brought up the power of sound and horns, and specifically in the Legendarium, and it's really cool that if you read this passage in the Fellowship of the Ring, in the Bridge of Khazad-dûm, it's very easily missed because a lot of people are focusing on what is Gandalf doing, what is the Balrog doing, and it's very easily missed. Nobody talks about this. What is Boromir doing? We know that Boromir and Aragorn rush forward to try to help Gandalf, and he tells them, get out of here, get Frodo to safety, and then they kind of do. But Boromir blows his horn, and it actually, for the briefest of moments, stops the Balrog. And this is what I'm talking about, is that sounds, Luthien song, not being stopped by walls of stone. This is big sound music, a horn. It was only for the briefest moment, but to think that for just that brief moment that Boromir could stop Durin's Bane in its tracks is pretty amazing. Matt, I'm going to kick it back to you now.
Oh, that's going to be the greatest segue of what I have to say.
Oh, good.
John,
I love it.
Oh my gosh, this is the best ever. The last time the Balrog, one of the 7 Balrog lords, heard a horn sound was in the War of Wrath. Must have been the last time, because the ones that escaped and buried themselves in these mountains, and all of a sudden he's listening to a horn in his own domain, and he's probably like, holy crud, that is not a good sound. If a Balrog had PTSD, that might have been that moment. So I would I saved the best for last in my little segment here. I got one sentence to read related to songs. Very next sentence where I left off reads this: Luthien stood upon the bridge and declared her power, and the spell was loosed, it bound stone to stone, and the gates were thrown down, and the walls were opened, and the pits laid bare. Many thralls and captives came forth in wonder and dismay, shielding their eyes against the pale moonlight, for they had lain long in the darkness of Sauron. Now, when I think about this kind of power in song, what came to me when Sid was talking was this thing I wrote down, which is all words are song. In Tolkien's world, they are song. Even people talking to each other is a form of song. They harness either the good or the bad or whatever is going on in the world. And she's giving an example of speaking basically sound to power, if you want to call it truth to power, sound to power. And it recalls a famous quote by Voltaire: to hold a pen is to be at war. And when I think of all words are song related to Tolkien, I think it'd be helpful if people could imagine the most beautiful singer, female or male, but let's just for right now say female. For example, Ariana Grande. In one of her most beautiful songs, or high note type songs, imagine that kind of singing with perfect acoustics, but empowered by an actual magic. Not just the magic of song, but actually an enchantment coming out of the way she sang, to the point where you are so distracted, or so set to sleep, or so set to peace and non-motion that you can't do anything. That's the kind of power we're talking about in Tolkien's works here. And lastly, I'll just say that I love these kind of segments when we're talking about these things. and people who have, 135 years of combined research, the three of us, you know, find the same things to agree on. I think it's really cool. I think it's really neat that we get to talk like this. People get to hear uh, basically a digest of these really really interesting passages that do find their way through so much of what Tolkien's writing about. So that's my reading for tonight, and that's been pretty fun. Thank you.
No notes. Sid, you were raising your hand. Go ahead.
One of the darkest times in my entire life, illness had been going on for years, and I was thoroughly ready to give up. And just so happened a new movie showed up in the theater called The Fellowship of the Ring. And I had been 6 months in deep despair. I was not suicidal, because I have a commitment not to do that. But I couldn't come up with any better options. And I bought 2 tickets in a row to watch The Fellowship of the Ring. And the moment that Arwen sang to heal Frodo, I was uplifted back into a hope for living that has now lasted over 20 years. And so that to me is the power of elven song as a very real, I would not be here. I might be alive and deathly ill and crippled, or I might not be, I might have shuffled off the mortal coil to pick up a little Shakespeare, but I would not be able to hear and do this were it not for the power of love, creativity, and song meeting the depth of physical pain and grief in which I've often lived. So this is very real to me. My life is recreated by the hope, by the promise of subcreation, of the eucatastrophe, and the commitment to living that renewal in my life every day. And I want to thank the two of you and all of the audience here for joining me in this blessed effort to bring healing to our lives, the lives of those we love, and the whole world. Because that's what we're really doing here. However small or large, it doesn't really matter if you're like Sam and Rosie having a bunch of kids, or like Frodo dumping the ring into the fire as best he can. Whatever part we are given, may we do it well.
Yeah,
Thank you, guys.
Sid.
It was brought a tear to my eye there. Rico Thingle said facts. The Fellowship of the Ring movie changed my life entirely. Magic, and this just goes back to the first discussion as well. Films, not necessarily The Lord of the Rings. It could be anything. A movie could change your life in a pretty drastic way as well. It's not all explosions and sword fighting and stuff like that. It's just, and just letting the outpouring of support. People in the chat are all saying, Sid, that was touching, that was beautiful. So, kudos to you. That, like I said, almost brought a tear to my eye there. Getting back to
For 1 second, I want to reply on the whole thread about music. Dan Fogelberg, part of the plan. Love when you can, cry when you have to, do what you must. It's a part of the plan. Has renewed my life, my marriage, my wife's life. That's my tip.
You know what? I was going to say some other stuff about Sauron and everything, but because the power of song is so... Zach says you're the man, by the way, said... The power of song is so entrenched in this, and even, not just song, but what does Luthien do to Morgoth? She dances, which is, you don't dance without music. She had to have been singing or something. Something is creating music. It had to be her. She danced. She put his whole court to sleep, and then once they were asleep, she was able to focus it all on him. This is the most powerful being in the world, and she knocks him out. That's
Well, it wasn't
insane.
just him. It was the
Well,
way
like
it's
I said,
described was
all of them, yeah. But
it was all of
but
his,
once she
all
had
his Balrogs.
all of them asleep, because you could believe that she could put Balrogs and trolls and orcs to sleep, maybe even Sauron. But then when she does it to Morgoth, that's real power.
Well, we read that a month ago, and the passage is probably one of my top 5 favorite ever because
Yeah.
the way that the throne room is described and all the beasts and demons that are there, we're talking about several Balrogs, probably 3 or 4 dragons, all the orcs. They all went down for the count.
Let me get to. So I was gonna, like I said, I was gonna talk more about that, but like the musical description is permeating everything, and I wanted to give you guys lyrics. I mentioned the song "Do You Realize?" I want to give you guys these lyrics. I don't know if you've ever heard this song before, but I want you to hear this. And this is it's a very Tolkienian message here, because it's about mortality and about the fact that all of us, you, me, everybody watching, everybody that will watch, everybody that won't watch, we're all temporary. In this world, at the least, we're temporary. And we do what we can. I'm going to read the lyrics here. Do you realize that you have the most beautiful face? Do you realize we're floating in space? Do you realize that happiness makes you cry? Do you realize that everyone you know someday will die? And instead of saying all of your goodbyes, let them know you realize that life goes fast. It's hard to make the good things last. You realize the sun doesn't go down. It's just an illusion caused by the world spinning round. The rest of the song is mostly repeating that in different configurations. But yeah, I mean, and it lacks a little bit of impact without the music, but when you hear that, it's starting off almost like a love anthem, like you have the most beautiful face, but then, hey, everybody's going to die, and that's okay, because we have magic in our lives. We have music, we have love, we have all these different things, and it can be difficult, life goes fast. Sometimes bad things happen. Sometimes you could be overwhelmed. And sometimes you need escapism, you need fantasy, you need fairy stories, you need something, as Sid said earlier, to just get a break from everything. One of the most persistently foolish comments that I get on Quora, I don't get it on YouTube, which is fantastic. I don't get it on Twitch, which is fantastic. But on Quora, I get this one comment, and I'm sure that Sid's gotten it, and I'm sure that Matt's gotten it, where you're talking on a deep level about something, The Hobbit, whatever, the Silmarillion, maybe Beren and Luthien, and you get this one fool of a took that says, why are we talking about this? It's not real. It doesn't matter. And, or they'll say, do you know, or do you realize it's just fiction? Do you know it's not real? I was like, wow, I should have realized that when I went to the fiction section and bought these books. Yeah, of course it's fiction. That doesn't make it not real. It just means it didn't happen literally. Stories are real because somebody told them, somebody spoke them out loud, or put pen to paper, or finger to typewriter, or voice to text, or whatever it is, and let their creativity flow, let the Ainu Landala come through them and make something that matters to people. And how sad for the people that don't have something like that in their lives. How dull is that? To not have escapism, to not have something to give you a break from the world. And oddly enough, 3 of the times that this comment has come across my feed has been from people with PhDs. And I'm just like, wow, just imagine studying something that matters to you, right? Sid, you were raising your hand.
Yeah, one really quick thought on this. As a writer who's published 9 books and 10,000 answers on Quora and 100 articles on topics of deep meaning and value, I believe that every story is only half told when it's published or spoken or shared. The rest of the story is what each reader does with it in his or her life.
Application.
So
Application.
please, and Tolkien believed this too. That's what he said, take what I did and keep sub-creating. Not under him, but under the divine. So we create our lives based on our stories. Let that be, may our life be part of the eucatastrophe into glory.
Yeah.
I would just say that I would let me just add to that real quick.
Go ahead.
I would just say that anybody who sees nothing in fiction and nothing that can absolutely be proved, in that way, they really are either ignorantly missing or deliberately missing the point, which is everything that Tolkien is talking about is real. It's not that everything there's no hobbits necessarily, but there are hobbit type people. There are no Sauron. There is no Sauron, but there is a Sauron force in the world, and it thinks and speaks like Sauron. And these are the things that they miss. I don't know whether they're trying to rain on our awesome parade. I think that's part of the reason, but also they just don't really get what great authors have to say in their stories about what you might call the human condition and the way to transcend our human condition and to be better. Those are the realities that we're really, really dealing with here.
Okay. Sid walked away. I'm hoping he's okay. He's coming back. Zach in chat said that, well, he mistakenly said Glorfindel. He meant Elfwine. Elfwine giving the big red book to Tolkien to translate is my Santa Claus. You can't tell me it's not real. And here's the thing, Zach, and I'm going to say this, and I say this with love. I can tell you that it's not real, and 100 other people could tell you it's not real, but that doesn't matter, right? Who cares what anybody says? Just like somebody can sit there and say it's fiction, it doesn't matter, and I would say it's fiction and it does matter. Anybody could tell you anything, but it's what you do with that matters. Alice said that these stories are real because of what they mean to us and how they shape our lives. And I just think, I can't imagine anybody's life not being shaped in some way by a story. I don't know, maybe their parents never read to them. Maybe they never watched television in their life. I don't know how people wind up like that. It's kind of crazy. And that little chiming sound that comes in perfectly there means that we're out of time for this segment. Where is the timer? I gotta make it stop making noise. There we go. Okay. So that leaves me. And my topic, it's interesting how beautifully the two topics that we've had so far flowed into each other and played off of each other. Mine's a bit different, but I think that it will relate to some of the things we've discussed, especially in Sid's topic. So I'm going to set myself 2 minutes here to explain what we're talking about here. Okay, so
yes, it's just an introductory, John.
Yeah, I'm not the one that makes that mistake. Okay, here we go. So my topic is actually the role of masculinity in Tolkien's Legendarium and how it's expressed. There is a phrase that comes up in a lot of modern discussions, which is toxic masculinity. And I have to get ahead of this because I know every time you say this phrase, there's a reaction from some people who are, I don't know, maybe they're a bit backwards, maybe a bit reactionary, but they say, they throw up their hands and they shake their fists in the air and they say, now they're telling us that masculinity is toxic. No, nobody's saying that. But masculinity, like any concept, can be expressed in both good and bad ways. And I was thinking about how Tolkien presents good masculinity and how he presents bad masculinity. And he does this in a very clear-cut and straightforward way, where if you want to see the perfect examples of how the expression of masculinity should be, we look at characters like, for example, Aragorn, Sam, Faramir, Beren, and such. And if you want to look at the bad ways, we have Eowl, Maeglin, Grima, Wormtongue, and the biggest tamale of them all is Morgoth. So let's talk about this. I didn't use up the full 2 minutes here, but I'm done with that. I'm going to set 30 minutes, and I guess Sid's starting, so here we go. Sid, go ahead.
I'm going to keep my piece very focused because I've been thinking about this. I'm going to use Rohan as the place to look at for this. Two examples of incredibly healthy masculinity, and one, an extremely toxic one, all from mortal men. And the two are Theoden and Eomer, and it's very interesting. Theoden, obviously, when we first meet him, has been poisoned by, I would say, Saruman through Wormtongue, or Wormtongue as taught by Saruman, and is weak and debilitated, and if he fails, Middle-earth fails. And, of course, Gandalf the White comes and renews him. And then he steps up to what? The ideal of the heroic, purely human, no elvish blood over here, aging leader whose destiny, the ideal way to die in Rohan, is a heroic death going to war to defend the nation. And meanwhile, what is the ideal origin story of the birth of a young king, heir to the throne, who shows up in battle, victorious, earning the right he had through his inheritance, Eomer. So you've got the two ends of the age spectrum. Eomer is a coming-of-age story, and Theoden is a death story, but they are both incredibly positive masculine role models. And then Grima's interference in Theoden's story feels like, I mean, I'm not going to compare nasty people, but feels like the most gruesome and awful thing a person can do when you read it.
Absolutely.
Bill Fernie maybe too. Anyway,
okay. All right.
There are others. But I'm saying those three all in the context of the culture of Rohan. And it's very interesting that the three people at the Battle of Pelennor Fields, Aragorn and Imrahil, both have an elvish link or lineage. Eomer does not. What makes him so utterly indestructible, I believe, that is the oath between Rohan and Gondor to always
be there for each other.
Aid.
To be there for each other.
Be there for each other. And that's a very that's a brotherhood.
100%.
So
100%.
That's some very positive masculinity as human. I'm done.
Okay, because I was going to...
I was going to... Okay.
Okay, so if you want to... Okay, there's no way of getting around it. Tolkien was a real person who lived in the real world. And when we look at examples of toxic masculinity, Tolkien lived it. He saw it all over the place. He wrote a fantasy. And he showed us not what we are, but what we could be. And Aragorn is sort of the perfect example of the manly man as he should be. He is a leader. He is a provider. He is strong and powerful and well-spoken. He protects the weak. This is the biggest thing. He protects the weak. He's a king. He embodies not what a king is, but what a king is supposed to be. And then we see the opposite end of the spectrum, of course. But I want to talk about Aragorn because Aragorn also writes poetry, sings, tells his friends that he loves them, kisses his friends. He's not afraid to cry. He weeps when Boromir dies. He weeps several times, and nobody is sitting there pointing at him and saying, "Oh my God, you're like a woman. You're not a real man," because that sort of thought isn't I'm not going to say that it doesn't exist in Middle Earth, because it absolutely does, but it doesn't exist within the circles of the good peoples, the free peoples of Middle Earth. One of the biggest expressions of toxic masculinity is a sense of entitlement. And we see this from the original sin of Morgoth, feeling that because he was made the way he was, that he is the mightiest of all of the angels, that he is entitled to shape. First of all, he's entitled to create whatever he may and to fill the void with all manner of life as he sees fit. And when he can't do that and the world is created, he feels entitled to overrule all of the Valar and to rule the world and to shape it in his own image. He's scorned by Varda. He's scorned by Arien. He never marries. He doesn't find love. He lusts after Luthien. He tried to ravish Arien and was burned by her. He has a complicated relationship with light, and especially light being a very feminine aspect in Tolkien's world. The Varda being the mother of stars, Arien being the sun, and all this. So, of course, I know Matt's going to go on the yin yang when I kick it over to him, and we see this in the evil characters. Grima Wormtongue convinces the king, doesn't literally poison him, but poisons his mind, convinces him that he's weak, convinces him that he's too old and too senile to lead. One of the great lines in the book is, "Perhaps your fingers would remember their strength if they grasped your sword." And Theoden, it's not like the movies. He doesn't become younger. He's already that old. He's a very old man, and he holds his sword, and he doesn't become young, but he starts to feel young, and he feels that strength welling up in him, that goodness. And now, as Sid said, he has to go and aid Gondor. Well, but first he has to aid his own people. He has to protect the weak, because what is Saruman doing? Attacking the weak, attacking the soft targets. He's not fighting the Rohirrim. He's fighting farmers. He's razing the land. He's pillaging. Eöl trapped his wife and then forced her to marry him, and then their son fell in love with his cousin, and when he couldn't get her, he went to Morgoth. He literally went to Satan when he didn't get what he wanted. Perhaps the biggest expression of toxic masculinity in the Legendarium, though, is Saruman. Saruman is the guy that as soon as something doesn't go his way, he throws a complete fit. He goes into this rant. He starts insulting everybody around him. He starts scheming. Varda made a simple comment. Varda, the queen of the world, makes a comment about Olorin, Gandalf, that he is not the third. She doesn't say what she means, but Saruman jumps to a conclusion. She's saying he's better than I am. And this leads to so much suffering and pain, because now all of a sudden he's jealous of Gandalf before they even got to Middle-earth. Saruman hates Galadriel. He hates everybody around him, basically. But if you notice, he's the kind of guy that as soon as something doesn't go his way, Galadriel wanted Gandalf to be in charge of the White Council. And here's Saruman thinking, who is this elf woman putting my subordinate ahead of me? He can't deal with that. And of course, Gandalf's just the sort of guy who's like, you know what, let the baby have his bottle. Matt, I'm going to kick it over to you.
Well, John, you're some kind of telepathy going on here.
Really? Okay.
Yeah. No, seriously, dude, it's just weird. But I was thinking about Saruman and Orthanc.
Oh, okay.
That was actually I already had it written down. I don't know what you're looking at my notes or something.
No, I'm not. I can't see.
No, I know, I'm teasing. But interesting that you bring that up, because Saruman is displaying this, even this toxic masculinity within a divine being. He's a Maya. He's able to be at fault, and he is not perfect, which is a different topic for a different night. But what's interesting to me about it is that we have Saruman displaying in the end this unreformed, degraded form of toxic masculinity, and he's doing it inside of Orthanc, a tower that was built by the Númenóreans that was not built of anything of steel or what you would call man-made. It was more man-erected. It was made of this obsidian-type stone. And when you think about the fact that it was about 500 feet tall, and it was these pieces they found and were able to bring into this position and fashion this tower out of this massive stones. This is a feat that is only matched by the and a few other societies in antiquity. But the Númenóreans and what they built is not toxic masculinity. And I'm not talking about how the Númenóreans ended, but I'm talking about when they were building these things from the materials of nature. And they just made this tower. And they were proud, yes, but they were also, at the time that they came to build this, they were trying to help people. They were trying to make things better. Yeah. And Saruman, in the middle of it, is occupying this symbol of redeemed masculinity.
Now,
and he's behaving in a way of toxic.
Not redeemed, because they didn't need any redemption in this case.
Well, what I mean is a good example.
Yeah,
unfallen masculinity.
There you go. Unfallen is a great...
unfallen achievement or unfallen work of help and production in the world. And Saruman is occupying this place. And I just find that interesting. The other thing I would say real quick about what Tolkien is writing about is Tolkien, unlike a lot of authors, especially in modern terms, is not afraid to show the high and the low. Mm-hmm. He's not afraid of showing the left and the right.
Yep.
He's not afraid of talking about the most beautiful things in Middle Earth, and then how the orcs were intimating how the orcs were made. He doesn't shy away from any of the depths of anything, whether it's good or bad. And so what I love about Tolkien's writings is he shows the low, but he also shows the great men.
Absolutely.
Who stand what they believe in and defend others. And they do it sometimes with the brunt edge of their sword, with their pen, with their mouths, with their crown, with the way they love others, including the wonderful females, the ladies that they're in these stories with. And so we get to see all of it. This is the big reveal for a lot of people who haven't read a lot of this stuff is, oh my gosh, we are seeing it displayed not just a few times, but throughout his works.
I have comments, and then I'm going to kick it over to Sid. But first, to address a few things in the chat, because some really wonderful things have popped up here. You said that I'm, spying on you telepathically. I think Laurel here in the chat might be spying a little bit on Sid, because me and Sid talked about this earlier, and Sid said that Laurel said that for the dichotomy of toxic masculinity versus positive masculinity in Hobbits, we have Ted Sandyman and Samwise, which, by the way, Laurel, exactly what Sid said to me earlier when I told him about my topic. Also,
we should introduce who Laurel is real quick.
Yeah, Laurel is one of the 9. She's in our fellowship. There are 9 of us, just like in The Lord of the Rings, that we are Tolkien scholars on Quora. Alice here says that another ideal, this is not Tolkien, but another ideal of positive masculinity in popular media is Superman. And what does he do? He protects people. This is from Deborah. Aragorn knows how to repair his clothes. He's in the wilds. They're getting all torn up. He doesn't go running home to Mother to get his tunic stitched up. He does it himself. That's a fantastic example there for Deborah. And Zach points out that he lets Éowyn down in a very caring and honest way. He doesn't give her false hope. expresses genuine care and friendly love for her. And I'm glad you brought up the phrase friendly love, because I'm going to talk about two extremes of I didn't get the girl and here's where I'm going to go with it. Maeglin, I mentioned, basically caused the fall of Gondolin because he couldn't get with his cousin. And then what happens? He goes right to Satan. He goes to Morgoth, tells them where Gondolin is, and that's the end of an entire civilization just because one guy couldn't marry his cousin, who, by the way, was already married. I just want to point that out, too. And then the other extreme, well, there's two of them. There's Celebrimbor and there's Gimli. They were both madly, deeply in love with Galadriel. And, of course, they couldn't have her. She's already married. She chose Celeborn as her husband. In Unfinished Tales, Celebrimbor even points this out. He says that you may have picked him over me, but that doesn't mean I'm going to be a weirdo about it. And he gives her one of the three rings, which is really important because a lot of people imagine that when Sauron enchanted his ring and spoke through it, that all of the elves are wearing their rings. Most of them were, but the three rings were not on anybody's fingers. Celebrimbor had them, and he heard Sauron, and then he brought them to Galadriel, and he said, "What should I do with these?" And they had their whole discussion, and he gave her one of them, and the other two went to Gil-galad. Gimli, a dwarf, comes to Lothlorien. Now, Gimli, nobody is going to ever accuse Gimli of not being an absolute man. And I don't mean man as in mortal man. I mean just a male. He is 100% dude, is what I'm getting at here. And he comes there and, there's some words between him and Haldir. Legolas is sort of sniping at him a little. They kind of bicker like an old married couple a little bit. Aragorn has to step in and say, hey, come on, it's not the time or the place. But anyway, basically he's treated poorly by the elves of Lothlorien until Galadriel comes in and he falls completely madly in love with her. He doesn't try to take her away from her husband, or anything like that. He knows that's impossible. But he demonstrates something called courtly love, which was a real thing that we seem to have forgotten as a society, where you could love somebody from afar and appreciate them without being a weirdo about it. And that is an example of positive masculinity, where you can love somebody but not possess them or not feel like you absolutely have to have them, because love is supposed to be giving, not receiving. I'm going to kick it over to Sid now.
I'll start by picking that one point up very directly. Courtly love. What does one do if you're madly in love with someone unobtainable? The answer is you become a better person. So you become a better man. You're a better knight. You defend her kingdom even if she's married to her king and you're not. So courtly love at its best. We won't talk about some of the things that went wrong in King Arthur's court along those lines.
No.
Oh, no.
Let's not lance a lot into this.
Hey, at least Sir
courtly
Gawain
love-
had it right.
Sir Gawain had it right.
Yeah. But courtly love at its best is, what Gimli did in deepening the best of who he was because of his love. And this is this goes back in Western literature over 2,000 years, because you've got Odysseus or Ulysses, and you've got many figures after him. And so this whole idea of positive masculinity, but there's also Éomer in relation to Éowyn. The way he uplifts his sister. And, rewrite that. If he was a nasty guy, he would have been doing what Grima tried to do, and it would have been really sick and disgusting.
Let me cut in here.
Let me cut in here.
I'm glad you brought up Éomer and his sister.
I'm glad you brought up Éomer and his sister.
I gotta wait for you to mute. I'm glad you brought up
I'm glad you brought up Éomer.
Okay, I'm glad you brought up Éomer and his sister, because one of the things that Éomer says, he believes that she died at Pelennor Fields. He doesn't find out till later that she's alive, and he sees his uncle, who he really was a father to him, Theoden, laid out. He's dead, and he says, "Why is my sister not here next to him? She died in battle too. She needs to be honored as well." And then, he gets the best news of his life, that she's actually alive. And he cries in mirth. He weeps. So that's another great example of positive masculinity from Éomer. I'm sorry, Sid, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Actually, you remind me of one other. When he knows that Theoden is dead and thinks that Éowyn is dead, he becomes utterly grim in battle. I mean, to be honest, if I had to face one of them, I'd go for, after Éomer thinks Éowyn is dead, I'd rather be chased after by Aragorn. So there's a fierceness of truth and justice that is the best that men can be. I also wanted to go back to Saruman, because there's a hidden point about Saruman that most people don't realize. We don't have exact dates, but for several 100 years before Saruman fell really badly, he expelled the White Council. He convinced them that the ring had dropped into the bottom of the, rolled down the Anduin and dropped to the bottom of the sea. And it took Gandalf over, if you can, the shortest you could say is over 17 years, arguably over 50
it's about 20.
years.
It's about
20. It's about 20.
To break the geese that he was under. But once he broke it, he thoroughly saw how utterly deceived and deceptive Saruman had become in his selfishness.
Okay.
Okay.
What's interesting is I was going to talk so much about Aragorn, and I think we said everything. I keep coming back to Éomer and Gimli as well, but
Actually,
let me interrupt on Aragorn, because when you gave the long litany of his virtues, you missed one.
Go ahead.
The hands of the king are the hands of the healer.
Mm-hmm. And what's interesting is another great healer, Elrond. Elrond, a poet and a scholar and a healer. But anyway, going back to Éomer, Éomer and Gimli have a really interesting relationship, because it's very adversarial at first. And it starts off in this adversarial sort of way because Gimli thinks that Éomer is rude and crass and uncouth. And they get to know each other better, and they become comrades in arms, and they become good friends. But the line that Éomer crosses is that he says something ignorant about Galadriel. And, Gimli says to him, "I will teach you the art of gentle speech, even if I have to use my axe to do so." And of course, they kind of have where they measure each other, so to speak. They have a bit of a peeing contest between the two of them, and then Aragorn has to be the adult in the room and get everybody to sort of knock it off, which is another way that he's almost like a parental figure, even though Gimli's older than him. But what's really interesting is that Gimli says something to him. He says, if you ever meet Galadriel and you don't say that she's the most beautiful woman in all of Middle-earth, we're going to have a problem between you and me. And then after the ring is destroyed and the quest is over and they're all sort of celebrating, they have some sadness too. They have Theoden's funeral. Éomer, he is now the king of Rohan. He's in a very different position than he was previously, where he was sort of thrown out of the king's residence by order of Grima Wormtongue and was sort of just wandering around. He's now the king. And he calls Gimli to his table and he says, "Do you have your axe with you?" And Gimli's just sort of like not knowing where he's going with this. It's like, not with me. I can get it if I need it. And he says, well, I have to tell you that I have seen Galadriel, and I cannot say that she is the most beautiful woman in all of Middle-earth. And Gimli says, well, I'll go fetch my axe, which I believe 100% he meant as a joke. And Éomer says, that the reason that he cannot say that Galadriel is the most beautiful is because he finds Arwen to be more beautiful. And Gimli nods and says, I prefer the sun and you prefer the moon. And this is Gimli showing one of the greatest traits of positive masculinity is the ability to say, you know what? You're right. It's a matter of opinion. Go ahead, Sid.
Love it. Nice job, John.
Thank you.
I remember it as, I prefer the morning and you prefer the evening. We can check the text later. But there's also something hilarious that's unsaid. I like the grandma and you like the granddaughter. And Gimli is a lot older than him. But, and yeah, it's exactly, and also Aomer specifically said, had I seen Galadriel in any other context, I would have agreed with you. So he's putting her as grandma's a top number 2 there. And the honoring of the two and the hilarity of it, and then the hilarious thing in the background that they kind of know but don't mention, they're talking about grandma and granddaughter. And of course, in fact, not only grandma and granddaughter, but Galadriel raised, and I believe shared a lot of her magic with Arwen. So, the one who brought her up.
And through Celebrian as well. She doesn't get mentioned that often because she's not in Middle-earth at the time, but I just imagine if there was a third party that was like, wait a minute, what about Elrond's wife? What about her? Was she hot? I want to see that discussion. Just to bring in a few things from the chat here, because we're almost out of time here. Zach says, Book Éomer and Gimli are a perfect example of masculine love. The way Tolkien shows their friendship grows is superb. I love the back and forth about their preference in elven women in return. And that was before I brought it up, so that's wonderful. Gulhern Falerios, I hope I'm saying it right, he says, I've been playing a Lord of the Rings game all day as the Dunedain, and I got smashed by the clans of Enithwaith. Are they actually a thing? Their capital in that city downstream from Tharbad. I'll get back to you on that, actually. And also, Zelda Man, hello there. Hi. And, I think that's it. But, okay, let me get back to you about Enithwaith. So, I don't know which... Are you playing the Lord of the Rings online? Is that what you're playing? Enithwaith it translates as Central Wilderness. It's basically... it's hard to describe, but it's near Eriador. It was a real thing. I'd have to point to a map, and I don't have one that I can put up on screen very quickly. But it is real. It is real.
It's like North Central, and these are the unaffiliated tribes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, it is real. That's an army. If they join together, they're an army.
It's sort of like if you look at like where Rohan is on the map, and then north of that is Dunland, and then just to the west of that is the Enithwaith. Waith sort of means like wasteland, wilderness. Just you see a lot with Forodwaith, the wastes of the north. So yeah. Oh, it's a mod called Divide and Conquer for something called M2TW, which I don't know what that is, but yeah. No, it's a real place in Middle-earth. It's just not something that really comes into play in the Lord of the Rings because nobody really lives there. But earlier they had. How much time do we have left here? Where'd my timer go? Oh, we have a minute left. Any other examples of positive or toxic masculine characters in Tolkien's work that we want to talk about?
I got one, but it's going to be the opposite side because, it just dawned on me there's not very many, actually not any I can think of, where the toxic femininity is shown as a descending, destructive, or devolving character in the works. What we have is Thorinwithil, who is the female messenger of Morgoth in
messenger of Sauron.
Winged. He was, but he didn't. He didn't. He was the messenger of Sauron for sure, but I think he was actually working. Well, she was working for Morgoth.
Well, everybody was working for Morgoth.
So she was a messenger.
I'm going to stop the timer.
Right, that's what I meant.
Sauron was the only character that she ever interacted with.
Well, I know, but that's true. I wrote an article on this. One of my last conclusions was that we don't think that Sauron and Morgoth at the time weren't communicating by her fastest way of communicating and delivering messages. I think that's not logical. Yeah. He would have sent anything fast to him that way. Let's just leave it at that, I think. Yeah. But the other thing is that we don't have any toxic femininity that devolves the way that the male characters do, except we also, obviously have Ungoliant. But I think that's an interesting curiosity there, that we don't have that a lot. The women who are involved, there's several, very many actually, more than people think, but they all do not devolve, and it's just interesting, just as a last comment on this section, which I thought was really good, by the way.
Just to address a question from the chat from David Morazzo, who asked, I thought Luthien was the most beautiful. Luthien was called the most beautiful of the children of Iluvatar, and also Arwen greatly resembles her. But you have to remember that the scene that we're talking about is a discussion between two mortals in the Third Age. They've never seen Luthien. They don't know what she looks like. They're talking about the most beautiful woman in Middle-earth at that time that they've met. So that's what it is.
That's right.
Gulneme Feleros, I hope I'm saying it right, says, I think that Carl Jung would have loved Ungoliant. Loved or been terrified by, I think. Absolutely. She is a Jungian nightmare. Aiden here says that if someone goes to fight Satan for you, you must be gorgeous, which is absolutely true. But what's interesting about that story is that, Beren is willing to go and to hide in a stinking werewolf carcass. Well, actually, first he's ready to just storm the gates. He gets captured, tortured, loses his hand, and all this stuff. Well, he loses his hand later. But he goes through literal and figurative hell for her, and gets his reward, which is to be with her until they both die. But what's interesting is that she's the one that fights Satan, not Beren. She's the one that puts him to sleep. Beren pries a Silmaril from his crown, tries for another, and then realizes, wait, this is a bad idea when the knife snaps and it cuts Morgoth's cheek, and he starts to worry this guy's going to eventually wake up. But So, and of course, here's the thing. There are some, like Sid, for example, who may argue that the most beautiful woman in Middle-earth is not Galadriel or Arwen. And I think Frodo would even agree that it's probably Goldberry. But Gimli never met Goldberry. Éomer never met Goldberry. But she was described as having an earthly sort of heathen appeal. She's not ethereal. She's not beautiful in that sense. She's just hot.
But wait a second. What about Rosie?
Sam would.
We've got to realize that who you think is the most beautiful is a very personal question for us guys.
Absolutely.
And who you will go to the end of the earth for.
Back to the beauty. We're back to the beauty of the eye of the beholder again.
Okay, we hold on.
Exactly.
Okay, we hold on.
But in a deeply inspiring way for each of these characters, in a different way.
Yeah.
Like, I want to get home and marry her. That's Sam, and I will fight to the ends of the earth for her, and I will go through horrible, terrible pains for her. I don't know how many people out there are guys who've been married for over 35 years, but I get it.
And I have a comment for the person who mentioned Jung.
Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I want to interject or directly respond to that person. If you're interested in what's going on philosophically with her, you need to look up these following things. You can replay it for yourself. Negative creation, anti-being, primordial entropy, transcendent paradox, and conceptual breaches. And if you roll all those up into a weird can of soup, you're going to have Ungoliant.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Oh, and one last one.
Oh, go ahead.
And one last one. Nihilism.
Yep, not nihilism is the word you were looking for.
Nihilism, yeah. Nihilism,
yeah. Sid, stop.
Hold on.
Stop.
Yeah, please post all those words into the comments in chat. And I also want to say one thing about Jung. I think for Jung, Ungoliant would be the most beautiful concept and the most horrific being.
And what's interesting is this discussion over, like who's the most beautiful woman and everything that you see is always from a very non-toxic place as well. Of course, yes, Gimli and Éomer get a little heated with each other. There's some threats thrown around, but nobody is being crude. Nobody is being demeaning or objectifying anybody. It's all very above board because, you know what? If you were to ask J.R.R. Tolkien, he would tell you 100% the most beautiful being that he ever created in his work was Melian. I'm sorry, not Melian. He said Melian was the most beautiful, but if you asked his opinion, he would say it was Luthien because that was his wife. His wife was Luthien. He was Beren. It's on their graves.
Well,
but yeah,
I agree.
Hold on.
However,
let me get to the point I was trying to make. Is that in all these discussions, there's disagreements and there's all this, and as was pointed out, some people might think it's Goldberry, some people might think it's Rose Cotton, but they're never like saying anything crude. There's no sort of salacious remarks made. And most interestingly of all, I would say that like this is the only thing that like there's no locker room talk is what I'm getting at. We don't get this sort of lecherous, lustful sort of talk from the good guys. We get it from the Morgoths and the Maeglins and the Eols of the world as well. And I want to point out one last, and I didn't think about this, and we really do have to end soon, but one last example of a sort of toxic masculine standpoint, Feanor. This guy left his wife behind to go on a crusade that he was told not to go on. He believed that only he was right and that he was the hero and that nobody else was ever going to do anything. And even if he failed, it was all going to be okay because at least he did something. And that's a very toxic thing. And look what he did to his sons, At least he had a grandson that turned out okay.
Can I drop in a final thought?
Yes, please. Final thought.
Yes, please. Final thought.
Great lead-in for next month. I've been talking about all of these positive models. Next month, I want to talk about who is Gollum for us. Mm-hmm. And he's a toxic masculinity figure we didn't even mention. So we will pick up this theme next month on my thread.
Yeah, that's a good point.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And I think I had another thought, but I've lost it. But I just want to thank everyone for a great time together, exploring ourselves and how we see the world.
Matt, final thoughts, and then I'm going to do something before we start.
Okay, final thought was that I believe that you are correct about what Tolkien would think about his own character being his wife and being Luthien. The way he puts it, though, is from Beren's point of view towards Luthien. With regard to Melian, even though she is not a woman and she is not elven, he does very clearly say that she is the most beautiful female who had ever been in Arda, straight out. So,
but he's saying that as an objective fact. I'm saying that his personal opinion might go more towards Luthien.
I agree with you.
Because Edith would smack him
otherwise.
I just want to pick up there. In this one issue, I once answered a question on Quora about how come all of the interracial marriages in Tolkien are men marrying up. And I think this is the only solid case I have for Tolkien writing directly out of his personal view.
He felt he
He
married
also
way
wrote
up.
some
He felt he married way up.
experience like, post-traumatic stress. But his personal view, he was uplifted by a marriage to a woman who he called Luthien. And I think so when he wrote about couples and romance, he played that model over and over again because he liked to. And there's very little, Tolkien mostly wrote out of what he spiritually believed or what his soul called forth. But on this one, I think he just did what he really liked. And I think that's really cool.
I have the perfect way to end this segment, John, real quick.
Go ahead, quickly.
I agree with that they may have married up, but I think the reason they married was because the women that we're talking about believed that they were marrying equal, meaning that the men were redeemed enough to be worthy of their love. And so in the end, we have the opposite of toxic masculinity. We have men who are equal to the great women that they're married to.
That's a beautiful thought. And to cap it off from the chat, it was also pointed out that Feanor is a great example of somebody, and this is a popular thing. If you want to know what toxic masculinity is, boiled down to just 3 simple words: main character syndrome. Believing you're the main character in the story of your life. And that's one of the most toxic viewpoints you can have. And Feanor absolutely had that, as pointed out by several people in the chat. And I'm going to end our broadcast. Somebody requested this. Who asked for this? Hold on. I might have to scroll up here. Aiden. Aiden asked for a little bit of the Song of Parting. There's 2 different versions of it. I'm going to do the version from the Lays of Beleriand. I'm going to read that to you guys, and it's going to end our broadcast. Farewell now, hear, ye leaves of trees, your music in the morning breeze. Farewell now, blade and bloom of grass, that see the changing seasons pass. Ye waters murmuring over stone, and meres that silent stand alone. Farewell now, mountain, vale, and plain. Farewell now, wind and frost and rain. And mist and cloud and heaven's air, ye star and moon, so blinding fair, that still shall look down from the sky on the wide earth, though barren die. Though barren die not, and yet deep, deep whence comes of those that weep. No dreadful echo lie and choke in everlasting dark and smoke. Farewell, sweet earth and northern sky, forever blessed, since here did lie, and here with listened limbs did run, beneath the moon, beneath the sun. Luthien Tenuvial, more fair than mortal tongue can tell, though all to ruin fell the world, and were dissolved and backward hurled, unmade into the old abyss, yet were its making good for this. The dawn, the dusk, the earth, the sea, that Luthien at a time should be. So, there we go. That was requested.
And much prettier than my black speech poem I was going to do.
Well, I could.
I'm ready.
Post that in the notes too.
Oh my God, y'all.
It's entitled. It's entitled Al Golub Gorul, which it translates to the Elfin Maid.
The longest example of black speech that we have is, and I'll do it because I know people love it when I do this. Ask Naz Durbaturkash Naz Grimbatul. Ask Naz Trakatulkash Berzumishi Grimpatul. I love watching
Right,
Sid
we don't have
covers
time for mine, do we?
Yeah, no. Yeah, there's a meme that goes around when Gandalf is explaining the inscription on the ring to Frodo, and he said, Frodo could read Elvish script, but it's not in Elvish or any language that he understands. And Gandalf says, well, it's in the black speech, which I will not utter here, which is a line from both the book and the movie. But then in the meme, Frodo says, well, why not? And Gandalf says, because the look on Elrond's face when I do it in Rivendell is going to be priceless. I'm not going to do it again.
Well, a teaser for the next show. Anybody who tunes in on first Thursday of next month, I do have a Black Speech poem, and I'll be reading
Okay.
it then.
Just keeping in mind that this is a somewhat reconstructed Black Speech.
Best we can do.
Best we can do.
Yeah.
Just to give you
I've been
guys...
doing a lot of research on it.
those of you on Twitch, you know I stream every day, and I'm NecroVMX on Twitch for anybody who likes video games and wants to watch me play them. And it's, of course, a very different vibe. Just follow me on Twitch. What I think my moderator will probably put a link in the YouTube chat for you. But for those of you on YouTube, our next live event will be on the 20th. On the 20th, I will be live, and I will be doing my next reading and analysis of... Well, that's the Two Towers. Where the heck is it? Oh, here we are. Oh, that's the Return of the King. I don't know where the book is. I'll be doing the Fellowship of the Ring. Oh, it's behind the monitor. I'm not reaching for that right now. So that will be on the 20th, and then our next live after that will be April 3rd, where we'll be back here with the Council of Tolkien. And of course, every Wednesday, new videos of me answering your guys' questions from Quora. You can go to Quora and ask me any sort of question, or you could ask Sid Kemp on Quora any sort of question, or Matt on Quora is called Lore Master, and you can ask him any sort of question. Sometimes we all answer the same question, and it can be pretty interesting to see our different perspectives. And yes, we do call each other and talk about it after that usually.
Sometimes we even refer each other over.
Absolutely. There was one question that I got that I was like, this is more of a Matt thing, and I just referred it over to him. And yep, that's my Twitch as well. So I will say goodnight to everybody. And also loremaster.com, that's Matt's website. We're on there as well. So yeah, we'll see you guys next time.